Make sure you watch the video all the way through. Towards the end of the video, I'll be showing you the monthly chart and the measurements on it. We're slamming up into the trend line, closing just under it, around it. Monthly channels are really hard to work with. Long-term monthly channels. I think I got it very close. I got it as close as I could. I want to show you this towards the end of the video. Again, the stock market is likely top. I believe that we saw a top this week, as I warned you. We'd peak with the Fed. Told you Tuesday we might have a slamming into the weekly trend line. I told you on Wednesday, October 29th, I thought that we had the top in, and I still think that. And I think we're now starting the bear market. Check back Sunday, and I'll show you some other charts, some real important stuff to show you in this video. Some pretty amazing channels, like Apple. We had the earnings from Amazon and Apple, and Amazon was up here 9.5% during the session. Market rally, but I told you in Thursday's video, it was likely going to be a counter trend. You may see it fizzle out either Friday during that session or on Monday, and we still might fill the gap down from Thursday. Show you the 5-minute chart, and you'll be able to see it for yourself. Fill the gap today, but we came close. Still might fill the gap on Monday. A reversal in the weekly time frame. Told you going into this week that, again, if we had the breakout on Friday, last Friday, 1 week ago, the S&P 500 above the October 9th peak, and I told you that could possibly be a peak, and if it's not, we're going to peak this week, the Fed. And historically, that is what has happened. In 2007, anyways, we began to get those Fed meetings after the initial cuts, and we began to get sell-offs. And I think that that's what we're doing right now. We're getting a Fed sell-off. Powell canceling the December rate cut. They're going to do it still, and they're going to be doing jumbo cuts by January. Market will begin to sell off. Now, we saw Amazon rise by 9.5%. We saw Apple down 0.38%. They both initially rallied after hours on earnings. Amazon was up 9.5%. It gapped higher, but it got a black candlestick. Again, it closed. It opened higher, and it closed below that open, giving us this black candlestick. Apple got a reversal bar at the upper Bollinger Band. We opened higher, closed below the previous close. We ended up losing and losing the rally and getting a down day. So again, a reversal bar, potentially a reversal bar there. Apple's got a massive negative divergence on the MACD, the daily time frame here. It's got one on the RSI. The RSI had this divergence that gave us this pullback here early October, and now you're getting this multiple point divergence here, where you're getting this really large triple divergence developing on Apple. You say, this rally, it proves it. I had people yesterday when I was posting some charts on the S&P mocking at the possibility of a top because, Amazon and Apple, they're rallying back up in after hours. And I told you when I made the video, again, that very well could be the case, that we could go back and try to fill the gap. We even may go higher on Monday. Apple was up 2.87% for the week, but look what Apple did. Peak a stinking boo. S&P is turning off major resistance. NASDAQ turning off major resistance. What's Apple doing? It's rallying right into major resistance and doing a U-turn. This is the channel. This is the Apple channel from the 2020 low. After the pandemic sell-off, this is the channel. You connect the pandemic low, came close to it here, and then if you connect that to the April low, excluding the shadow, you've got a trend line connecting the 2022 top, the late 2021. Apple peaked first and diverged with both the NASDAQ and S&P. NASDAQ made a top in late 2021, S&P in early 2022, and Apple diverged with them, connecting that to our peak over here in February of 2025. We sold off, came back. We've got a channel here, and what do? We rallied right up into this trend line here, slightly overthrew it as we did over here. And again, I'm just excluding the shadow here, keeping the shadow here, connecting those, and drawing a parallel boundary connecting the 2021 high with our 2025 high, and you're slamming right into it. Apple rallies with earnings, but then reverses off of this trend line. That's a huge Nvidia move above the long-term trend line and this trend line here with their broadening formation both in the weekly time frame. We're getting an overthrow. That's okay. Some patterns overthrow the broadening formation or the rising wedge. A double top, you get an overthrow on the second peak more often than not of the previous peak. It doesn't negate the broadening formation. It is still in play. And again, we did go to new high. Closed above that level. We're probably not going to confirm a close above that level and get a follow through. You're probably going to have a false breakout here and get a reversal. We have turned off of the trend line here, and each time we've dropped sharply 36%, 44% on Nvidia. But you got a broadening formation going into and now overthrowing the upper boundary of this channel. Now we did the same thing at the bottom. Look at this. Again, you hit this trend line, over and over for a couple of years. You kept hitting it slightly higher. Just before Nvidia took off in 2015, it had a breach of that trend line. Now the breach of the trend line was not successful. We breached it and we did not push down and start a new downtrend after this rally for a couple of years here. Into 2015, we began to take off. We breached it, and then we began to take off into the 2018 high where we corrected, and later on into Nvidia's top in late 2021, and that was followed by the 2022 sell-off. And now we've had this rally, and we're going back up into this channel. So the breach of the channel, it didn't play out. You just had an overthrow move, and that's likely what we're getting right now. Just drawing a parallel boundary from these lows in here. We breached it. Just drawing a parallel boundary from back over here in the early 2000s. It's all the data that we have on Nvidia. Likely going to see a top right here. Tried to overthrow the trend line. This is the trend line going back to the 2001 high, parallel to that lower boundary. Overthrown it. But as we breached it in 2015 and then began to turn back up, you're probably overthrowing it and going to turn back down. We stalled at it here. We stalled back it over here in the summer of 2024. Tried to get above it here in October, the first week of October there, peaking on October 6th, week of October 6th there. And again, now you're getting above it. We'll see if we end up dropping back below it. I was watching to see if we get a close below this level, but we did not. So I think it's probably just an overthrow. Apple did turn off of its channel line. Nvidia closed just above it here in the weekly time frame. Please support the channel. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the information, please consider helping out today. I don't have any sponsors. Most YouTube channels do. They contact me all the time. I turn those offers down because I don't want to sell you anything. But I need your help in order to make it work. If you could just take a moment and help out and do what you can and support the channel today, I would really, really appreciate that. Anything helps. So thank you for your consideration for that. Again, we had the monthly close. We've turned off major resistance. I want to show you some things. Got the head and shoulders going on with the 60-minute chart here, the daily time frame. Post another video on Sunday and cover some of those charts, but I wanted to show you the monthly and the weekly charts because, again, we've likely completed a top this week with the Fed in the weekly time frame with our weekly bar and with our monthly chart. The stock market has likely completed the bull market and is now beginning the bear market. Now we got to see all of my signals turn back to bearish, my trending signals in the daily time frame to validate that, getting a major reversal off of these longer term channels in the weekly and the monthly time frame. Now I showed you this chart of Apple going up and slamming up into the upper channel line, slightly overthrowing it. It looks very similar to the NASDAQ. Again, this is going all the way back to the 2020 low for Apple. Parallel boundary from the 2020 high or the 2021 high. Now, the NASDAQ has a very, very similar channel. No touch after 2020, but I've just taken the 2018 low and the corrective low of 2018 and the corrective low of the 2020 low with the pandemic, and you draw a parallel boundary to up here. It's 2021 high, and it's pointing to right where we're at right now. We just have an overthrow. You've got a broadening formation, though, like Nvidia, and a nice looking channel on the NASDAQ, and we're slamming into major resistance. NASDAQ weekly chart, like Nvidia, has a broadening formation that's getting an overthrow here. Glue the shadow right here, and we connect it to this point here. We're just slightly overthrowing that level. We have overthrown the upper boundary of the channel I just showed you, but we didn't close above it, and you're getting a topping tail, and you're getting a reversal bar in these weekly time frames. I said going into this week, if we didn't peak on Friday, you're likely going to peak with the Fed this week. I told you Tuesday you had a good shot of a peak. We still may go higher with the Fed. We went a little bit higher with the Fed. We began to reverse and sell off. Slammed into this trend line on Tuesday. We overthrew it on Wednesday with the Fed. And again, we're starting a post-Fed sell-off. You're getting a topping tail and a reversal bar. I want to just zoom out again. And as we're slamming up into this trend line and slightly overthrowing it with the topping tail, and again, this is including the shadow over here. This is including the shadows down here. You're getting a topping tail. Let me just show you that up close. I'll show you this up close because, again, I talked about this earlier in the week. I talked about it on Thursday, and a little bit earlier than that, I talked about these. How do we close with these weekly candles? You need to be watching for topping tails at those trend lines of resistance, and I told you that would happen. But we ended up getting a shooting star candlestick. We gapped higher on NASDAQ for the week. We had four gaps and ended up daily chart above the upper Bollinger Band, and then turning down off of it, we're getting this topping tail off of major resistance here, and you're getting a shooting star. I'll be watching. Do we get a close below that candlestick? Now, sometimes you get back-to-back reversal bars, and at bottoms, sometimes you get back-to-back bottoming bars. That happens. If it's immediately confirmed, we need a close below this week's low, come back and fill the gap here and start moving to take out the 10-period moving average. You got to take out the 10-week moving average to get a bigger sell-off. I think NASDAQ's going to collapse by more than 30%, 34, 38%. Knows what it did with the bursting of the tech bubble. Well, then you're looking at a 40% drop rather quickly. Bursting of the tech bubble, it dropped 40% in 10 weeks. You got a topping tail, you got a shooting star. Now we need confirmation. A close below this week's low. NASDAQ weekly chart. By the way, the Dow got the same candlestick, a shooting star, same as the NASDAQ, slamming right into major resistance. The Dow was up 0.75% for the week, but it closed off the highs. It moved above 48,000, and then it dropped back below it, and it closed in the mid 47,000 range, about 500 points off of that level. Gave the rally back, and we got a topping tail right into this trend line parallel to the lower boundary here, and you got this Dow theory sell signal that I've been talking about. This is warning that we're forming a major top. The Dow has moved to a new high. The transports has not, and again, back over here, the transports peaked in 2021. The Dow's made new highs. The transports never did. That's a huge red flag. Longer term, but now in the more recent price action, there's a Dow theory sell signal. When we had the bottom, there was a Dow theory bullish bottoming signal. The Dow made a higher low, and the transports made a lower low, as you can see down here at the April low. So again, Dow going up, slamming into the channel. Apple slamming into the channel. NASDAQ slamming into the channel. Nvidia slamming into the channel and overthrowing it. Apple, the NASDAQ, the Dow, and the S&P, they're all turning off of these upper channels. This is the channel here from the 2022 low from the Dow. We have another longer term channel with our linear scaling with the Dow. And here, I've gone further back. Now, again, the channel that I showed you right here is our linear scaling with, again, just the 2022 low. Now, a larger channel, if we go back to 2020 and we connect 2020 parallel to the upper boundary here at the 2021 and 2022 peaks right there for the Dow. And if you connect that, it connects up to, we're just under it right there. We're slamming into it right here, right now, and turning off of it with that topping tail. And again, another channel like the S&P, like the NASDAQ, like Apple. This looks similar to the Apple channel. Apple had moved to the lower end of the channel here, but again, connecting the 2020 low, connecting the 2021 peak, you're pointing up to a level where we're at right now on both Apple and the Dow and the NASDAQ. S&P peaked in 2022, same thing. Going back to the Dow again, from that 2020 low. Now, we never reached the low here like with Apple, but again, the trend line, we're slamming into the upper boundary from the 2021 high in early 2022 in January. 500 weekly, same thing. You're going up here, you're slamming up into the trend line, and you're turning down off of it. Now, again, I've connected the 2020 low here, including the shadow, excluding the shadow of 2022, coming here and going up to exclude the shadow in 2025. So I'm connecting those reference points, a parallel boundary with the 2022 high, including the shadow, and that's where we've slammed right into, and we're turning off of that trend line. Had somebody tell me that technical analysis no longer relevant. Well, look at this trend line. You hit this trend line right here, and you bounced. Horizontal support trend line, you bounced. And now we've come up to this trend line. We tried to overthrow it from the 2023 low. We're turning back down off of it. And the upper boundary of the channel here, you're turning down off of it. So what I'm trying to tell you is that, again, as I said at the beginning of this week, moving above Friday's high, and late last week on Friday, I told you again, you're going to get a top either last Friday or this week with the Fed. I think you just had it. I think you had the top. You had a shot at it on Tuesday. I told you on Wednesday, I think that the top is in. I believe the top is in at these trend lines of resistance. Back on October 9th, the S&P peaked early October, right after Bitcoin did on October 6th. And if you include the shadow right here, we turned right off of that channel. As I said, again, you never know what these channels, if you're going to include or exclude shadows, they're better seen after they're already completed. Ours is probably completing right here with this week's bar, completing right here. Gone a little bit higher than the October 9th peak. We peaked about 3.5 weeks after Bitcoin, and that's what we should be looking for. Bitcoin peaked in 2021. NASDAQ peaked a couple weeks later, what we're seeing right now. S&P later on went on to make a new high, and they diverged, but S&P, I think now, is behaving more like NASDAQ Junior. I don't think it's going to go make a new high. I think they're topping together right now, and that's why I told you I believe the top is in. These topping tails will be confirmed. You're going to get back-to-back topping bars, or you're going to get confirmation next week. I think that the top is in on the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. The Dow, topping there at 48,000. Now, if I bring it up close, you can see. Previously, we were including the shadow here, and you were turning off of this trend line. We got the red trend line was down here at the October 9th peak. We moved down, we went back up, and we exceeded that level. I excluded the shadow, now slamming into this trend line on the S&P 500. And we actually closed right on the blue trend line. Remember I told you I thought we would turn down off of this red trend line, possibly close back below the blue and the red trend line. Pretty much closed right on that blue trend line with doji looking candlestick. And remember in yesterday's video I showed you the weekly charts. I told you to be watching for a shooting star, for a doji, some type of topping tail off of this trend line, and we did get it. But we went up, we slammed up into that trend line, and we reversed. This is why I told you I was speculating on a new short position at these levels of resistance on Tuesday and Wednesday, because I thought we would turn off of this trend line right here. Slammed into it on Tuesday, went slightly just a fraction above it on Wednesday, and got a gap and trap. That's given us this doji now here, which is likely the top. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the top. There it is, right there. You're looking at it. The bull market has come to a conclusion. The bear market is now beginning. I've said, I think you're going to see a crash in the next 10 to 14 weeks. It's going to take us back to either this trend line, the lower boundary of the channel, or back to this low right here. Again, probably 26 to 30%. You come back here, you're dropping 30%. You come down here, it's a little bit less. But we're going to be watching, and again, you likely are forming a massive head and shoulders pattern where you're going to get the right side of the head now. And it may be a slanted neckline, it may be lopsided with a right shoulder, but a good chance this pattern is setting up. And if we sharply decline into January, where I think the Fed is going to cut, I think the Fed is going to do emergency cuts in late December or January, and I think it's more likely it's going to be January. And if we see that happen, you come down here sharply. The Fed does jumbo cuts and you get a massive rally. Oh, it's over. All the people telling us that the sell-off's not going to happen, just like over here. Oh, it's not going to happen. You get the sell-off followed by a massive rally to get the right shoulder coming back up, likely to the highs over here. And that was at that 6147 peak there. Over through that trend line a little bit, but again, coming back up to that 6150 area or so, and getting your right shoulder, and then coming down and breaking this level. But we again likely put in the top this week, and again, I want to say it clearly and directly. I believe that we put in the top this week, and I believe, as I said, the end of this week broke above Friday's high on Monday, and I said you're going to top with the Fed this week, likely on Tuesday or Wednesday. We had a possible peak on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I think the top is in, and I'm calling a top on Wednesday. I think that is the top. Our high held for the week. I told you the Amazon and Apple rally would likely be a counter trend, and I think it is. Didn't fill the gap from Thursday. We still might do it on Monday. So keep that in mind. Now, turning off of this trend line right here, and pretty much closing right on the other trend line from the 2023 low. Again, you got your topping tail and your reversal bar. This is likely a top that is not going to be exceeded for a long. Now look at the weekly chart up close. Look at the weekly chart up close here on the NASDAQ. You have a gravestone doji. Earlier in the session, I posted a chart where it was still forming, and we still had time left in the session. It was forming a shooting star, but I told you again in yesterday's video and Thursday's video, I told you to be watching for a topping tail, whether a shooting star, whether a doji, whatever, because again, I expected a topping tail off of these trend lines of resistance. That is what has happened. We just witnessed a major top, have completed the bull market this week on Wednesday. On Thursday, we have started the bear market. Really starting it, though, during the session on Wednesday with the Fed. The gap and trap we got on the intraday charts. You got a topping tail here. You got a gravestone doji. You got a shooting star on NASDAQ. You got a shooting star on the Dow. You had a shooting star here, but it ended up with a gravestone doji candlestick forming a divergence here. Gravestone doji reversal bar. Again, you want to be watching for a close back below the low of the candle. And then we want to be watching for confirmation and a follow through that eventually takes us back down below the 10-week moving average, the red line you see right there. We have been holding above the 10-week since the end of April. You need to drop back below the 10-week moving average, the red line you see right there. We got it back above it here. It's been acting as support. We bounced off of it. We had the early October sell-off. Now we go higher. We get this candlestick slamming into major resistance. Watch for a close back below that 10-week moving average, and eventually we're coming back to this 200-week moving average. Down here at the 4,800 area. This is where our actually it's just above the 4,800 area. We had a bottom here at the 4,800 area in April. And again, you're going back towards the 200. You're going back towards this low unless you find support at the channel line that I've shown you in this video. Now let me just zoom back in here. Again, you're getting this candlestick up the trend line of resistance. We're up 0.71% for the week, but you were at 69.20 at the high, and you ended up closing 80 points lower at 68.40 by the close, giving back over half the rally. Down 80 points off the high. We only ended up 48 points higher. So again, we've got a topping reversal candlestick right into the channel. I think that we've completed the 5-leg push higher, 5 primary waves higher. This is the weekly chart into this upper channel line. After completing at the April low, cycle wave 4, I think we've completed 5 primary waves higher for cycle wave 5, and I think that has completed the super cycle, the monthly time frame, the grand super cycle. I think it's done, and I think we're going to turn it down sharply. The month of October out, I believe that you've topped at this trend line in the monthly time frame, and I believe we've completed the grand super cycle, which is the red count here circled with Roman numerals. 1, the 1929 high. 2, an extended wave 3 into the 2000 top. Went nowhere for 13 years. You got wave 4 in 2009. And the whole bull market is the super cycle here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5. You have the super cycle here of 5 waves higher into a grand super cycle. Again, Roman numerals. On the weekly chart, the primary waves completing cycle wave 5 that completed here, super cycle, the super cycle, completing the larger red count, the grand super cycle. Now that we've chopped, we're going to have a bear market. And again, valuations like the Buffett indicator, market cap to GDP, it tells us that over the next 10 years, returns are going to be low or negative. And that means you're going to have a crash or two, like over here back in with the bursting of the tech bubble. Again, you went nowhere. Over here in the 60s and 70s, you went nowhere. Over here, you peaked in 29. You didn't make a new high for 25 years. I think we're going to move back to this midpoint right here towards the pandemic low. If you take out the pandemic low, you might try to come closer to this level right here, which was the prior highs of the bull markets in 2000 and 2007. And we may do that. But I think you're going to move back to the midpoint here. I think you're going to do that into 2026. And I think in 2027 somewhere, you're going to find a bottom. They're above the pandemic low or below it. And then I think you're going to get a new bull market that takes us into the 30s, the early 2030s. Right around the early 2030s is when we're going to have the debt bomb explode that the politicians have given us. It may happen in the late 2020s, 2029 or 2028. I think it's more likely you're going to bottom out in 27, have a bull market somewhere into the early 2030s. They can do accounting tricks to just drag out longer, but eventually there's going to be a price to be paid. The United States living above our means and driving up $38 trillion in debt. Likely see that debt reach, the 50 to 60 trillion level range, and then it's game over. This will be a recession. The next crisis will be the debt bomb exploding, and it will be the Great Depression. It'll make the Great Depression look like nothing. That's where I think we'll get the next bear market and actually hit this trend line going back to the 1550, 1575 area. Maybe something worse. Maybe we go back and test the 2009 lows. But this is what I think is happening here in the late 2020s, 2025 to 2030, and then on from 2030 on into 2040, you're going to have these two major drawdowns in the market. We're starting one right now, and then actually you'll start the bull market later. Likely in 2027, the bear market will end. The bear market will be associated with a banking crisis with the regional banks' exposure to commercial real estate and their sour loans. Next one will be about the bursting of the will be about the debt crisis, courtesy of the politicians. Let's remove all the counts here. I want to just show you again. We've moved slightly above this level, but then we turned off of it, selling off after peaking, in that topping tilt in the weekly time frame. Now, what I've done is I've taken the low here after the 2029 sell-off, and I've excluded the shadow right here. I'll bring it up close so you can see it, and connected that to the 1929 high. That's where we're at right now. We just slightly overthrew that level. If you include the shadow down here, if you include the shadow with the higher low here, then we did overthrow it by much more. I think you got a nice looking channel here. I've got it as close as I can get it. It may not be perfect, so we may have not overthrown that. But again, I've taken it from the low here, and I've slightly I've excluded that shadow. We slightly dipped below it. Hard doing these long-term parallel channels to get it exact. I got it as close as I could here. We get a little bit higher into the closing bar there. May not have overthrown it. Come closer anyways to it. And then you come up here. Again, I got it as close as I could. And here you've got the 1929 high. I think that's pretty close right there. It takes us into the trend line with our monthly high. With our monthly high here, the topping tail in the weekly time frame, we turned off of this level here on the S&P 500. Actually closed just under it. If I exclude that shadow, got a higher low, we might have turned off of it perfectly. It's really, really hard working with these longer term parallel channels. I got it as close as I could, but I think you're turning here. We're just overthrowing it. We might have just reached it and turned off of it. But I've been able to get the long-term channel parallel boundaries just a little bit more accurate, but you get the idea. We're turning here, we're going into this resistance. Quarterly chart is probably a little bit easier to work with for me than a monthly where you get every bar is 3 months. In fact, we're going to turn here off of this trend line.